Hello, third grade, and welcome to Writer's Workshop, Day 3, working on persuasive writing. Remember, persuasive writing, we are trying to persuade the readers using a number of reasons. Persuasive writing is a writing that tries to convince the reader of an opinion or point of view. Today, we're going to work on a class writing, and we'll be choosing an animal to convince our parents to buy. For our lesson today, we're going to be looking at these words objections and arguments. If you have not yet watched the video lesson on the read aloud earrings, pause the video, go watch that, and then come back. In Earrings, the narrator considers why her parents always say no to pierced ears, and then she gives her argument. So she may have said that she is not old enough for it, and then she'll give a response. She'll say, I am old enough. All of the teachers or all of these other people have them. All of my friends have them. I also want you to think about the narrator's tone. Do you think the narrator's responses were reasonable? Was it something that she could ask her parents, or was it like our last video lesson, like she was asking them for something like a giraffe, something she could never buy? Or are earrings reasonable? When you first think of why your family objects or does not agree, the word objects means to not agree, or always says no to your idea, you can better develop your argument to persuade them to say yes. Now today we're going to be using this chart to help us out. Objections versus arguments. And we're going to be giving an argument for each one of these objections. For this part, we are going to try to convince our parents, I would like to redecorate my room. Now that's a reasonable request because maybe we just wanted to put up some posters, change our bedding, and we wanted our parents' help to do that. So that's a reasonable request. And our parents objected and they said, no, your room is always messy. So what kind of response can we give to that? So your mom tells you, no, you cannot redecorate your room because your room is always messy. So you could tell them, I will clean my room every Tuesday or every week. Go ahead and type that in. Objections are what your parents would say that would mean that you couldn't do it, and an argument would be what you say back to convince them, to persuade them. The second objection is it's too expensive. And maybe you'll hear that when we're talking about pets. It's too expensive. Well, my argument would be, I can help pay for it. Remember, our arguments are trying to convince and persuade our parents to have our same opinion. I would like to redecorate my room. Type that out. And finally, you never spend time in there. So my argument to convince my parents that yes, I will spend time in there is after it's decorated, I will have room to hang out. So pause the video now if you need more time to type these three, and then we'll move on to the next part for today. Now, in your lessons for Wednesday, for persuasive writing, we came up with some things to convince our parents, and you guys came up with some really good ones, so I wanted to share some. We'll just start from the top, and I'll share a couple of them. We have Allison Going to convince her parents to get new shoes. That's a reasonable request. Have a sleepover at a cousin's house or go to Burger King. All of those are great reasonable requests. Let's see. Aubrey. Convince her mom to get new clothes, to not wake her up, or to convince her mom to get Roblox, or maybe more V-Bucks for Roblox. Ooh, Jaquine, I love these. She want to have a healthy cat or dog, so maybe get a cat or dog. Have her own bedroom, or convince her parents to get a computer. Let's see what other good ones we have. Ooh, I love this picture, Peyton. Probably to convince her mom to, let's see, get a puppy. That one's going to be useful for today's lesson. Let's see what else we have. Let us start a YouTube channel. That's a reasonable request. Make maybe zip lining. Maybe go zip lining. So Ryland's look like it might be some arguments. Let's see. Oh, getting a dog is what Olivia says. Having her own Xbox. So we have a lot of really good brainstorms of what we want to convince our parents. So we're going to do a rough draft and practicing how to come up with objections and arguments. Now we're going to still use what we brainstormed in later lessons, but today I want you to focus on a pet that you would want. It needs to be a reasonable pet. It can't be something like an elephant. It has to be a reasonable pet. So maybe a lizard or a guinea pig or a dog or a cat or a fish. Whatever you would like as a pet. You can also add a picture if you want. I want you to write it up here at the top. So what I want to convince my parents to let me have would be a dog. And you write whatever you want. We have a couple of parts that we're going to work on to convince our parents. So first we have to think of reasons why your family has said no to your idea before. And you can even ask them and see what they say if they say no. If you ask them, why can't I have a dog? Why can't I have a fish? What do they say? So my parents would say, it is too much work. That's probably what a lot of your parents will say for different kinds of animals. So that could be one everyone can put on their list. Another one would be, we don't have the space. There's not enough room to have a dog. Or a pet, or whatever kind of pet you want to convince them of. Another reason they might say no is it's too expensive. Now I'm just going to use those 3 for today, and I want you to come up with 2 more that your parents would say no. Maybe your siblings are enough work. Maybe you don't have the time for a new pet. Maybe you're not home enough to love the pet that needs to be. And then we're going to move these down to the objections. So you don't have to retype them, just move them down, because these are objections. When they say no, that is called an objection. So we'll move them down here. If you have to pause the video now, so you at least have these 3, I want you to pause the video and write these out. Then I need to provide my argument. So how am I going to convince them that it's not going to be too much work? How can I convince them? Well, I'll tell them I will get up early before school to walk it. And maybe you have a different pet that you need to feed it, or you need to clean the living area of it, like a lizard. Our second objection, we don't have space. So how can I convince my parents that we do have space? Well, I live pretty close to a park. So I could tell them, I can take it to the park to run. Number 3. It's too expensive. How can I convince my parents that it's not too expensive? Well, I can say, I will maybe shovel snow or rake lawns or mow lawns to get money to pay for it. I will help pay for it. So I want you to try your very best to come up with 2 more objections and 2 more arguments. Now we'll go back to some of those things you really want to convince your parents after we keep practicing how to convince people. We're going to become really skilled convincers, and maybe you might be able to convince them of something on that list you had from Wednesday. Once you're finished with this, then you can move on to the next activity.